Hello peoples. The reason why she is so popular is that she has been featured in countless novels and Netflix movies because when she was found, there was no one on board and there was no sign of struggle or foul play. So she has raised countless conspiracies and fantasies which is still debated to today. And this is no other than the infamous Mary Celeste. But it is so fascinating that even if you have heard it before, you would want to stick around till the end because we are going to dive deep into the story and it will sound completely new. And so, if you are already creeped out, hit the subscribe button before it vanishes, never to return again. Also, click the like button, and now let's get straight into the story. In 1862, 37-year-old Benjamin Bates was married to his stunningly beautiful cousin named Sarah Elizabeth Cope. They had the most amazing honeymoon on Benjamin's schooner, which was called Forest King, and just after 12 years, they had two children, which were Arthur, who was born in September 1865, and Sophia Matilda in October 1870. Briggs worked as a captain in New York harbor, but he ultimately became so successful in his career that he decided to retire from the sea and go into business in 1872. That was 2 years after his daughter was born. His brother Oliver also planned to retire just like him. According to them, they were just tired of this wandering life, moving from one place to the other. At this point, Briggs and his brother Oliver had enough in their savings. They had managed to accumulate a lot of money during their career, and so they had quite enough. Unfortunately, none of them ventured into business as they both planned to. It is not known to the public why they discarded this idea of becoming businessmen, but what is known to the public is that both of them decided to invest their money in shares of ships. Briggs bought 4 shares of Mary Celeste and Oliver in Julia A. Hallock. But on October 20th, 1872, Briggs went back to being a captain. He took command of the Mary Celeste and then became her captain after she went through a refit to prepare her for a journey in Genoa in Italy. Before that voyage, which is the voyage to Genoa, Italy, Briggs wrote a letter to his wife back in New Massachusetts because he was in New York at the time to supervise the loading of the ship's cargo, which was 1,701 barrels of alcohol, and then asked her to accompany her on the journey to Genoa, Italy. And so his wife got the letter and then agreed to go with Briggs. But if you remember earlier, they had a little girl who was named Sophia. Sophia was only 2 years old and they couldn't leave her alone with anybody. And so Briggs wrote a letter to Sarah that Sophia should join us on the voyage, and then Arthur, their oldest son, who was 12 at the time, should stay with Grandma, who was Briggs' mother. A week later, Sarah joined her husband in East River, New York, together with their little boy Arthur, in preparation for the journey. And so, Briggs and his wife Sarah continued to supervise the loading of the ship's cargo until Sunday, November 3rd. And so by all means, everything was going as planned, and Briggs would even write to his mother telling her that he intended to leave on Tuesday, and even added that, quote, "Our vessel is in beautiful trim and I hope we shall have a fine passage." But that would all change as soon as they left the shore. On the morning of Tuesday, which was November 5th, they took off. Mary Celeste left Pier 50 as they initially intended. There was Briggs, his wife, and their little daughter on board. And not only them, there were a couple of people who were selected to join them on the journey, which were 7 other crew members. So in total, there were 10 people on board. After moving the ship just a couple of miles, the weather wasn't clear, and so Briggs told his wife and the crew members, let's wait for the weather to clear up a little bit, and when it is better, or when it is in a better condition, we can continue the journey. And so they did just that. As soon as they got to Staten Island, which was about 5.7 nautical miles from Pier 50, New York City, he anchored the ship and they all waited for the weather to clear up. And so while they waited for the weather to clear up, Sarah wrote to her mother-in-law to basically tell her son, who was Arthur, the little boy they left behind, that she loved him, and then she would try to remember everything that happened on the voyage and then tell him as soon as they returned. But the weather wouldn't clear up until Thursday, November 7th, which was 2 days later. And so on that day, Briggs screwed out the anchor and Mary Celeste left the harbor and entered into the Atlantic. And this is where things get a little bit strange. While Mary Celeste prepared to sail, there was another ship, also a Canadian brigantine named the Gracia. She was also preparing to sail the same path as Mary Celeste, which is from Gibraltar to Genoa. Captain David Morehouse was the one leading this ship, and he and Briggs shared a common interest, and some even believe that they may know each other. But the Gracia also left for Gibraltar on November 15, which was 8 days, and she also used the same route as Mary Celeste. As they got midway between Azores and the coast of Portugal at about 1 p.m. on Wednesday, December 4th, 1872, they noticed a ship heading unsteadily towards the Gracia and about 6 miles per hour. But the ship was moving in an odd manner and was kind of erratic and led Morehouse to suspect that, something was wrong. And as they got closer and closer to the ship, they noticed that there was nobody on board. He made a signal, but no one replied the signal. And so when he got closer, he sent 2 of his crew members, who was Devu and second mate John Wright, in the ship's boat to investigate. But after inspection, they realized there was no one on board, which means the ship was deserted, and the sails weren't even set properly and was in a poor condition, and some were even missing. They also find out that some of the riggings were damaged and some were hanging loosely over the side. The ship was in a bad condition, but everything was intact except its lifeboats. So apparently the ship's lifeboat was nowhere to be found, and that was a little bit strange. Also, there was some water in the hold, about 3.5 feet of water in the hold. It was much, but it wasn't that much for a huge ship like the Mary Celeste. Also, the rod used to measure the amount of water in the hold was also found abandoned on the deck. And so, as they were still searching, they found something. The ship daily log, which is this book they kept like the records of the ship in, was found in the mate's cabin, and its final record was made at 8 a.m. on November 25th, which was 3 days earlier before they found the ship. It documented the Mary Celeste's position as 37 degrees northwest on Santa Maria Island in the Azores, which is about 400 nautical miles from the place where she was found. The cabin was in a reasonable order except that it was a little untidy and wet, but apart from that, everything seems okay. So they started to raise a lot of questions in their mind, and there were no sign of struggle or violence, and so the only thing they could assume is that they abandoned the ship on their own using the missing lifeboats. And so Morehouse and his crew decided to bring Mary Celeste to Gibraltar. Morehouse sent Devu and other 2 experienced seamen to Mary Celeste, and he and other 2 remained on the Gracia as they also sailed to Gibraltar. Now, under maritime law, a salvor or someone who rescued abandoned ship could expect substantial share of the combined value of the rescued vessel and cargo, but the exact award depends on the degree of damage inherent in the salvaging of the vessel. And so, as Devu sailed Mary Celeste to Gibraltar, he was really proud of himself because he knew he was going to be paid well. Therefore, he ultimately convinced the Chief Justice of Gibraltar, who was Sir James Cochrane, that I think there is foul play somewhere, and the alcohol is at the bottom of this. And so on December 23rd, 1872, the Attorney General of Gibraltar, named Frederick Soliflad, ordered an examination of Mary Celeste, which was carried out by John Euston, who was a surveyor of shipping with the assistance of a diver named Ricardo Fortunato. Upon investigation, Euston noticed that there was a cut on each side of the bow, which he thought was caused by a sharp instrument, and also he reported finding a possible trace of blood on the captain's sword. The whole summary of this report emphasized that the ship did not appear to have been struck by heavy weather. He thought someone was involved. His assistant, who was Ricardo Fortunato, reported pretty much the same thing after inspection. Another inspection by a group of Royal Naval captains also endorsed Easton's opinion. They also claimed to have found blood stains on the ship's wheel, together with a deep mark possibly caused by an axe. And so, Flood suspected Morehouse and his men, and he thought they were hiding something. Maybe they may be involved, because he could not accept that Mary Celeste could have traveled so far without any crew. Now, a guy called James Winchester arrived at Gibraltar on January 15th to inquire when Mary Celeste might be released to deliver the cargo in it, which was the alcohol. But Flood said no. Before Mary Celeste could be released, they would have to pay a surety of $15,000 at the time. But Winchester didn't have that money, and so this quickly escalates into a sharp exchange with Flood. Winchester testified that Briggs was the man with high character and wouldn't abandon the ship unless maybe the situation was really extreme. Also, the initial suspicion of Flood that this whole situation was a mutiny and murder was ruled out after scientists analyzed the stain on the sword of the captain and elsewhere revealed that it wasn't blood. And so, with nothing concrete to support this suspicion, Flood released Mary Celeste from the court jurisdiction on February 25th. And after a few weeks, that was about 2 weeks, the ship left Gibraltar for Genoa. Ultimately, Morehouse and his crew were paid a salvage payment of 1,007 euros, which was 1/5 of the total. This story has raised a lot of questions since it happened, and a lot of people have come up with many theories to help explain this whole situation and the disappearance of Briggs and his crew. Some say there is a foul play somewhere, in the sense that Briggs was a very high character person and wouldn't abandon the ship for any reason, because the ship was not in a bad condition at all when she was found. And so Flood, the Attorney General, actually believed that Briggs and his crew were, murdered. Flood and some newspaper reports even suggested that Morehouse could have lain in wait for Mary Celeste, then lured Briggs and his crew aboard the Gracia and killed them there. But some also argue that this theory is just not possible, because the Gracia was the slower ship and she left New York 8 days after Mary Celeste departed, and she wouldn't caught up with Mary Celeste before she reached Gibraltar. Another theory was that Briggs and Morehouse were maybe friends and they planned this whole thing together. They partnered and wanted to steal the share and proceed. No evidence revealed that the two captains were even friends, and even if they did, why would they plan such an attention-drawing mystery? And why would Briggs abandon his son Arthur and disappeared permanently? Some people also came out with the theory that maybe they were attacked by pirates. But a guy named Charles Fay observed that, pirates would have looted the ship too, but their personal possessions, some significant valuables of the captains and crews were actually intact. They were left undisturbed. Now, let's take a look at this also. In 2006, an experiment conducted by University College London determined that fumes released by the alcohol could have caused an explosion, and that panicked the crew and caused them to abandon the ship. But now the question is, why was there no damage in the ship? Also, Briggs' cousin named Oliver Cobb later suggested that maybe they tried to escape to safety by the yawl and attached the ship ropes to it in order to enable them to return to Mary Celeste. But maybe they weren't lucky. The rope had detached and the Mary Celeste sailed away empty after the line had parted, leaving the crew to drown or something. But this didn't make sense, because why would they attach the yawl to the vessel that the crew thought was about to explode or blow up? And Briggs was a very experienced captain to do that, because even if the ship was about to blow up, it will still be a better bet for survival than the yawl. Some also argue that maybe it was a natural phenomenon. Maybe they were, attacked by a giant, sea monster or something. But till today, there have been just more questions than answers, and no one had been able to explain the real cause of the disappearance of the Mary Celeste. And so that would do it, guys. If you like this story and you like to see more of this, creepy, mysterious stories like this, subscribe. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, because I'll be uploading every week and I'm trying very hard to do so. And so once again, thank you for watching. See you in the next one.